Scraptrap is one of the most infamous characters in all of Fnaf history. Hopefully today I will be able to explain to you why he looks the way he does and why it isn't a retcon. So, when FNAF Pizzeria Simulator came out, we got to see William Afton again, and this is well before he started becoming really overused, so it was actually good to see him come back, and this would actually be the game that would wrap up his story. But unfortunately, he looked a lot different. Before, William Afton had a really intimidating design as Springtrap. He looked like a rotten animatronic. His golden suit had withered away and turned an ugly greenish color. He looked really tall and intimidating, and he looked very threatening. Well, in this game, he was very slender. He was very small. He looked like basically a skeleton in a costume, and a lot of people hated this, and a lot of people couldn't really understand why Scott made him look this way. Why ruin something that was already good? Well, the reason why I think that is because William had to ditch the old Springlock suit. I think whatever he's wearing here is not a fully functional Springlock suit. In fact, it's probably just whatever pieces remains of his suit and other suits that he could find in the trash or abandoned pizzerias. So if we look at the original Springtrap suit, we can see that it basically looks like a Bonnie. This is a representation of what it probably would have looked like if it was fully assembled and not torn apart. Well, if we look at the second suit, this is probably what it would have looked like fully assembled. You can see that these two suits are clearly intended to be different suits. They are built completely different from one another. One of the main things you may notice are the buck teeth in the suit from Pizzeria Simulator. Buck teeth were not in the original Springlock suit. This was a deliberate choice that Scott made to differentiate this suit from the other suit. Well, now since we've talked about the differences between suits, let's talk about the differences between the bodies. So, for the original Springtrap suit, we never really get a full look underneath the costume. We never really get to see just how much Afton is there. We can see when he tries to pull off the head to escape the body that he does have at least a skull covered in like rotten purple flesh. I would compare this more towards mummification than it actually still being his fresh flesh like a lot of people assume. So I would assume that if exposed to the elements long enough, this flesh could continue to rot and fall off and turn into a skull like we see Scraptrap have in Pizzeria Simulator. And because we can't really estimate just how much of him is still under the suit, there's no real way to know what Springtrap looks like under there. We can see bits of skeleton parts popping out at the hands. We can see what might be a skeletal arm under his suit. But really, there's no way to tell if the pizzeria design contradicts this because there's never a point where he slithers out of his suit fully. We do have a pretty good recreation of what Afton would look like under the Pizzeria Simulator suit though, because you can see so much under it because there's not a lot to it. And one of the things we notice is yes, there is a skull. Yes, there is some skeletal bits. But the thing that's more important is the little bits of rotten flesh that we could see in Springtrap, and the fact that he is being held up by wires. Now, this is a thing that I never hear anybody really talk about with his design, is the weird wires coming out of him. These wires are not just a him thing either. If we look at characters like Scrap Baby and Scrap Molten Freddy, like we can see that they are also held together completely by wires. And that's because at this point, none of them have endoskeletons to fall back on. These wires are the only thing keeping their form, and they all share something really in common with Innard, who is just wires and was never really, as far as we're aware of, a true animatronic. This is something that all of the later series Afton robots share in common, is that they use weird wiring to hold together the animatronic. So it's kind of befitting that Afton would take what's ever left of his corpse and do the same to him to try to rebuild himself. So if I were to say, why does Scraptrap look different than Springtrap? I would say, just like we saw in the FNAF 3 little Easter egg, Afton was actually able to pull what was left of him out of the suit. The reason why I think he would try to pull what's left of him out of the suit is because the suit was probably rotten and falling apart after being burned. We don't know really how long the suit would last after being completely burned, so I'm assuming that he had to get out of it, and he decided to raid other pizzerias to try to rebuild himself. And if you ask me, instead of having a endoskeleton like the old Spring Bonnie suit had, he instead injected himself with the weird living wires we see the other scrap animatronics have. And if you ask me, why does he have this goofy head? We can actually see why in FNAF 4. In FNAF 4, we see a scene of the crying child locked in a parts and service room. And on the shelf, we see a golden Bonnie head with buck teeth. Chances are Afton found this parts and supplies room and took what was left of this Bonnie head. And I think this Bonnie is a completely different build than the other Bonnie. If you want to know more about the differences between Bonnie suits, go check out my FNAF timeline video. I actually explain all the differences there. Hopefully this explains to you guys though why I don't think that Scraptrap is a redesign. I don't think Scraptrap is a reboot of Afton. I don't think he's a retcon. I think this was intentional, and I think that he is in a different costume. Tell me down below though if you guys agree with this. How do you think that Afton got into this suit? Do you think it's a different suit at all? Do you even like Scraptrap? I would love to know what you guys think down below. If you like this FNAF video, please hit that like button. If you know other people that like FNAF, share this video to them. It will help everyone out. It'll help this channel grow. It'll help get some new exposure to us. And if you guys want to see more stuff like this, you should hit that subscribe button, hit the bell, do everything that YouTubers tell you to do, because it actually does help out and it helps us make more content like this.